Good to see you, dude. It's
Yeah,
been a while.
yeah. We seem to have just about got there technology-wise in the end.
Yeah, we had a few bugs setting up, but we're all good now. I'm pretty new to this. So I've been so excited to get you, Joel, on the podcast because I met you very early on in my journey with XR at a place called Rybank Fields. And for anyone who doesn't know, Rybank Fields is a piece of land where MMU, Manchester Metropolitan University, want to destroy a lot of wildlife and build a lot of houses there for money. So Extinction Rebellion set up a camp to stop them, and I got involved. That's how I met you. Yeah, and another thing about Joel is it was conversations with you that made me really want to start having a podcast because you had a lot of very interesting points to make and very well thought out and stuff as well. So yeah, I'll let you talk a bit now if you want.
Well, yeah, it's weird. You've packed a lot in since we met, right, Bank. I mean, that was just like less than 2 years ago. I feel like we've had quite like I was kind of coming out of my sort of couple of years of really intense activity at that point, and you were you were like diving in 2-footed in a way that I've literally I've never known anyone else like just sort of rock up and be like, right, who's doing a direct action? I'm up for it. Like, but yeah, it's a pretty amazing space, Rybank. I think so much. I don't know, maybe it's just Manchester as well. Like, so many people who've gone on to be some pretty like heavy hitters and really some of the most committed and like courageous people. Even if I don't have often not agreed or not, even if I've often not really shared their view on the value of the action they're doing, their kind of dedication and courage is absolutely like off the charts, and a lot of those people have come out of Manchester and Rybank, and I think that's interesting to me.
I remember what we were talking about last time. We had a really good conversation. We was talking about a new system, whereas we have to basically a new system replacing the current capitalist system, where the richest people in the world control our politicians, and our politicians are all bought out, and we're all stuck with the hefty bills and inflation. Imagine a new world where you were making the argument where we could just, make sure everyone's fed, get the food to the people, basically. Do you remember the conversation we were having?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the kind of conversation that I think a lot of people in the kind of XR and family world have, which is, well, and a lot of people in the sort of environmental sphere have, which is this idea whether the this way of organizing society that we call capitalism, whether that can be made ecological or whether it fundamentally is ecocidal, like whether it's like by its very nature it is ecologically destructive because of the specific relations, like social relations that capitalism is kind of built on. Whether that means we need like fundamental change to those relations, to that.
Can I just pause you there for a second? I just want to add, like, it's a problem if you're a tree that's been cut down and made into planks is worth more money than the tree that's been left alone. Like, and that's like a problem because like the tree that's left alone, it might not make any money, but we kind of need it doing its thing. So
absolutely, yeah. I think that's it's a really simple way of putting that idea, but it's actually also I think one of the most effective. Like saying like capitalism, like GDP only values the forest once it's destroyed. Like, and we're seeing this at the moment. This is, I don't know if you've read much about kind of like this whole idea of natural capital, these moves that they're making to kind of monetize nature. There's a book I've not read it yet, called The Value of a Whale, and it opens, in fact, not read it yet, but even the first page is like, some researchers basically did some calculations to work out the economic value of a blue whale. And I can't remember what and they worked out the value of the whole whale stock, the world's whale stock. I can't remember, it's like $1 trillion or something of all the, and this is capitalism's attempt to deal with its own ecocidal nature, is being like, well, maybe if we work out the the potential monetary value of every tree and whale and fucking blade of grass, then we'll be able to market to, like, if you can turn everything that's alive into some sort of market calculation, maybe then we won't destroy it. And it's like more of the problem as the solution.
Can you imagine? I've got a solution I'm thinking of now. Can you imagine if we taxed like all the billionaires and all the things, just if we took all, like, all the money basically, and we made a new payment scheme, so every time you planted a tree or any kind of plant that was taking in carbon from the atmosphere and storing it in the soil, you would start to get a small payment, and companies would be allowed to plant shitloads of trees, but there'd be some clauses like it can't be monocrop culture. It's got to be like a strong ecosystem, like mixed like with wildlife, and they get extra money for like if species start moving and stuff like that. And you make it so like you could become rich by planting a rainforest. Imagine that.
I get what you're saying there, and I can see why. Versions of kind of incentive structures to bring about like restoration as opposed to destruction, that makes sense. But again, I think the issue is that, like, if we are still within this paradigm where everything has to be done in a way that makes someone rich, there's always going to have to be something new to exploit. Because eventually, maybe if you've finished all the ecological restoration, there's going to have to be a new avenue of making profit then. And like, there can never be stability. Like, there can never be equilibrium. And the living ecology of the world, it's all about equilibrium. It's all about things being in balance. The nature of capitalism is that there can never be balance, because there's always got to be growth. And it's a simple, like slogan, but it's one that's really stuck with me when I first heard that saying of like, growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of a cancer cell. Like, if you talk to a biologist or a doctor and you talk about an entity that's infinitely growing inside a host, that is called cancer. That's what defines cancer. It's something that's just won't stop growing inside another body. That is what capitalism is, because you cannot have, like, it wasn't true of feudalism, it wasn't true of like the ancient empires or slave societies. They didn't require to expand every year more than, like, bigger than the year before. The only
I think
social just to finish that, but like the first and only social formation in human history that requires to expand every single year on year. So that's exponential expansion, because it's like, if it's bigger this year and it's bigger next year than this year, that's exponentially expanding.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to be like, you can understand, anyone who understands cancer and a human body can understand that if you apply that same principle to industry on a planet, that's not going to work. Like, it doesn't, like, and there's no need for it to work, because the only reason we pursue growth, and again, growth's a bit of a euphemism, because growth's a biological term, isn't it? Like, we all understand trees grow, plants grow, that's good. Like, a baby grows, but like, trees don't just not stop growing. If a baby didn't stop growing, we'd be like, oh my God, what's wrong with this baby? Like, it's only when you get into economics that we go, no, it's just going to grow forever. Like, well, why would we want, like, And because growth is a
I
euphemism.
want to ask you a question.
Yeah, sorry. Go on.
I want to ask you a question. So this is quite a difficult question. I ask it quite a lot on this podcast. If you was given, let's say, dictatorial power over the United Kingdom from a non-violent revolution, and you could pick, like, I don't know, 5 projects that would be initiated in the country, what would they be? And you don't have to answer them all right now because it's going to be difficult. But just think of maybe the first one.
That's funny. Someone asked me that question, exactly that question. Like, if you were in charge, yeah, a couple of days ago, what would you do? And I gave an answer, and then she followed up with, "Well, how would you do that?" It's like, well, you didn't say I had to say how. Like, in the scenario, I've just got total executive power. Yeah, I think my answer to that is radical land reform. Like, radical land reform. In that, if I somehow have like dictatorial power, I'm taking every scrap of land off the church, the crown, all the royals, the old aristocrats, because all the old aristocrats, all the dukes and the barons and the earls, and they've still got all the land. Like, since like the Norman, like since William the Conqueror, there's families who've still got land that they've had for hundreds of years. And there's a bunch of corporations obviously, but like, it's amazing how much the land is still, it's not even capitalist land ownership, it's feudal land ownership. I'm taking all that land off that tiny number of individuals who use it for ridiculous things like grouse hunting, and I'm giving it to democratic, community-led ecological restoration projects, organic food growing projects, all the kind of things, eco housing projects, and we take back the land and use it for all the ecological and social things that we need, instead of it being the plaything of like this tiny number of like elite landowners who use it for all kinds of ridiculous stuff. Like, that to me, the number, if you can get, I mean, obviously that's like, it's kind of saying everything, but like in Britain particularly, our land is still owned by like the king and like, it literally is like we're living in the Middle Ages. And like, I think unless you can change that, because if you want to rewild, if you want to do like actually like nature friendly food growing, we need land. And the barrier to all these things is the fact that we don't control any of the land.
I'd take it even a step further than that. Like, I would start building, I would start converting skyscrapers in the city of London and Manchester and warehouses all over cities. Like, just convert all these massive warehouses into indoor, vertically stacked, hydroponically fed, like food growing machines, basically, like food growing warehouses. They already exist. They have like robotic arms that fly around on rails and stuff with like cameras and sensors, and like takes care of like a whole like millions of plants. This like robot. It's pretty cool.
I mean, like, I don't think you can grow everything. Like, you can grow.
You can't grow everything.
You can grow
take pressure off the land. So the idea would be to take pressure off the amount of food that we're growing on the land, so that land can then be like rewilded.
But that we can do that, like for like things like leafy greens, like hydroponics works well. But if you're growing anything else, like actual vegetables, grains, you need land. But yeah, I think we should totally like explore like urban food growing. Like you say, these these buildings in London and Manchester that have no social or ecological value or use at all. There's so much potential for urban food production. Absolutely, we should pursue that. But also, I think if you want to reduce land use, like, I mean, it's like 51% of the agricultural land in this country is used to grow animal feed. Over half of the, so like if you don't eat animals, you're already like reduced the land by 50%. Like, so it's madness. And like, there's 33 million sheep in this country. 33 million sheep.
Do you reckon? I want to ask you a question.
Yeah, go on.
Do you reckon if we got rid of, let's say we get rid of like 95% of all animal production, cattle, sheep, pigs in the UK, and we turn all that feed into a human edible food with maybe a couple of vitamins and herbs and spices and shit added in, and give it for free to every single person in the country.
Well, yeah, I mean, imagine
I
what and I think this is what I find really interesting talking to you, because you're really interested in you know, scientific innovation and development and technology, and this is why I think, like, thinking about marrying kind of the best kind of developments of technology with genuine, like, economic democracy, because, like, we produce enough food currently on this planet to feed about 10 billion people. There is no reason, like, technologically, scientifically, there is no reason for one single person to be hungry, and there's millions of people starving to death still. Like,
there's people hungry in the UK,
of course, and there's loads of people who they're not hungry, but they're malnourished, they're overweight, they're unhealthy because they're eating loads of calories, but the quality of the food is absolutely dire because they're relatively poor for this country, so they're having to buy the cheapest, lowest quality food. Like, there is no reason, and this is my point about capitalism. Is it's there was a time, maybe arguably, where it was developing our productive capacity. It was for various reasons it was pushing technology forward. It is now massively, like, hindering our development because everything has to go through this prism of making private profits, paying dividends to shareholders. Like, instead of being like, imagine we just had like a supercomputer that had like all the information of like all the food being produced in the world at any one time. Which, maybe that's a bit mad, but like, some supercomputer.
It's not that mad.
It's not, is it? Like, and it knows where all the people are. And then people are going to be like, oh, what if it turns evil? But, like, because it's just logistics. It's just going like, we've got some wheat here, we've got people here, we've got to get the wheat to the people. It's just organisation. But capitalism doesn't allow us to do rational planning of our resources because it's all about making money and destroying surplus. Like, you've seen the things about Amazon, like, destroying, like, products still in their packets because the way you keep the value of a product up, you don't want too much of it. You don't want supply to exceed demand because then the value of your product's going to drop to zero. So we destroy excess food. We destroy, like, excess electronics that we make.
Listen, I've been liberating some of this food that's being destroyed.
Good.
Yeah.
But that's technically stealing, like, legally.
Well, technically that never happened. It's all hearsay.
Mate, you've got bigger fish to fry than like bin diving. I think.
Yeah. Anyway, listen. What he was just saying then, he was talking about a supercomputer being able to organise food production for humans. Here's a crazy thought: like, what if we did, in fact, one day build an AI and entrusted it with running our society, and just like, it has to be built properly, and it could be hacked. So it's probably not a good idea. Like, it'd probably have to be like some next level. I don't even know. I'm not a computer scientist, but it's a possibility. One day.
Well, my favourite author, Ian Banks, his most popular, his Culture series, which looks at this kind of super high-tech, post-scarcity, kind of anarchist, communist future society, that they wouldn't use those labels. They have these like godlike artificial intelligences they call minds, who basically run the society. And like, it's like the humans are just basically all like living very long lives of sophisticated hedonism, and all their needs are met, and like, the interesting bit of the stories is because when they have contact with other civilizations who are like less advanced, they try and steer them in a progressive direction, and that's when it gets pretty interesting and morally complicated. But like, yeah, like, I don't know, like, it's like our only visions of like synthetic consciousness are like evil, like it's a Matrix or Terminator, or like, we only ever see them as like scary things, whereas like, if we built them to be like completely compassionate, and then I suppose that's the story of iRobot, because it's like then they'll try and control us for our own good. But then maybe they should, because we're not doing a very good job of it.
Yeah. You know, I watched the iRobot like a few months ago. I was in prison, and I was sat there thinking, well, actually, they're kind of right.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, is anyone else really sympathising with the computer here? Because like humans are doing a really bad job of governing their own affairs. Like, but like I don't know. Like a book I'd really recommend. Ursula Le Guin's The Dispossessed, which is about anarchists on a moon. And they have the DivLab computer, the like dividing labour computer, that just assigns people jobs. Like it knows what people's skills are and like qualifications, and it just like basically tells people, right, you've got to go and do this job, and everyone agrees to abide by it, because like
what if someone doesn't?
Huh?
What if someone doesn't agree to abide by it? What if someone says, no, I'm not working today?
Well, then I guess, like, I mean, which obviously they can do, but like being part of the society, you're brought up to completely believe in the principles of mutual aid and solidarity. And the only way the society functions is everyone is willing to contribute. And if you're not, yeah, you'll be kind of ostracized and like, you know, people think you're a bit of a dickhead. But like, that's what you're not forced to. But if you want to be part of a society that doesn't have rulers, then it actually involves working quite hard and like doing a lot of meetings. This is the thing, like people are like, oh, anarchy, it's all chaos. No, anarchy has to be like the most organized thing in the world. Like if you don't want to have people in charge, you have to have about 20 meetings a day because you've got to get things so organized. And I think that's you know, when you have a system with like a lot of hierarchy, you can have a lot of chaos as well.
Well, do you think absolute power always corrupts?
I don't think you have to have absolute power. I think any power corrupts. I think any power over your fellow human being is a corrupting thing. So yeah, absolute power corrupts absolutely, as they say.
So,
but,
what about if you were given power? Do you think you would be corrupted?
Yeah, because I'm very imperfect, and all those little spites and resentments and jealousies and things would still be there. And then suddenly, if I'm free to act on them without consequences, like even the best person in the world has an unpleasant side, and if that unpleasant side is kind of free to, and I don't consider myself an anarchist. I don't think the way to building a communist world is necessarily without using power. Like, I think the power of the state is, especially given how catastrophically urgent the climate and ecological like breakdown situation is, I think we're going to have to try and use the power of the state. How we take over the state is the big question. And how we do it in a way that doesn't get so corrupted we end up just doing the same horrible things. I say we. I don't think we're going to do it. Like, I don't think me and you are going to do that. Well, I don't
know. Like, I'll definitely be there with a megaphone. I won't be like using violence or anything, but I'll definitely be climbed up a tree somewhere, like hanging out a tree with a megaphone and giving it a good rant and maybe getting some footage.
But I think this is the thing, is like how... And I think this is what, with a lot of the kind of JSO kind of stuff, it's still really framed around like demanding something. It's better than asking. It is demanding that the current institutions of power like do something good. And like, I'm not sure how. I don't know. I find it a bit of a paradox, really, because I still think.
I've got a question.
Go on.
So, I read a book when I was in prison by I can't remember what she's called now. She was a black female activist from the 1960s, and she's done a lot of writing since. But yeah, that's the one. That's the one. And in her book about power, she says something like you can't ask for power. You can only take it. You have to take power. You can't ask for it. You just got to take it. And that's really, I've sat there in prison looking at that, and I'm thinking that's kind of deep. Imagine if like we recruited so many people in Just Stop Oil or Extinction Rebellion, and we started going arresting oil executives at the plane and walking them out and putting them in vans, and then taking them to an Extinction Rebellion
People's Revolutionary
nice
Tribunal.
prison. Yeah, exactly. Even if the police bust in later on and like arrest you all, like it'd be the most beautiful action anyway. Because like,
I really like that idea, because that's what I think. That's the only like constructive engagement I want to see with Shell and BP executives, is them facing some revolutionary justice at the hands of the people who have been the most harmed by their crimes. Like, I'm not interested in talking to them about anything. I think we need to build the power to destroy them and make them face accountability for, well, pushing humanity to the edge of like civilizational collapse. Like, there's no one in history has done anything more evil than what fossil fuel executives are currently doing right now. Like,
oh my god, that's a line.
Well, it's true, isn't it? Like no one in history has, just for the most crude reasons, like just to keep a bit, just hold on to their wealth and power just for a few more years, they are moving us closer to like destroying the conditions of organized human life on this planet. Like, I mean, it's, you know, famous Noam Chomsky quote, like the word evil doesn't cover it. Like, it really doesn't. Like, and it's weird when we talk about like, oh, what would you have done if you could have like shot Hitler? Like, we're not really having the like, and I'm not advocating for political violence. Mainly because you're going to put this on the internet. But yeah, and it's
like,
not.
By the way, I'm not advocating for violence either.
But it's going to. But this is the thing: the violence isn't going to come from us. It's not going to come from white people, you know, relatively like, you know, middle class people in the imperial core in the global north who have a lot to lose. And you are an incredibly courageous, you know, self-sacrificing individual. I said, But there's people around the world who are already seeing their entire family, people, nation, culture, way of life fucking wiped out by ecological breakdown. They are gonna, the few of them who understand, like, even if it's a few of them who really understand who is responsible for that, like, at some point, some people are gonna want some serious payback for what's been done to them, and it's not going to be non-violent. And like those CEOs and like political leaders, they're going to have big targets on their heads, because like there's going to be a lot of people around the world who've lost everything, and maybe all they want is revenge. Maybe they don't even care about like making the world any better. Maybe all they want is to hit back at the people who have taken everything from them. And that's like, I think that's just an inevitability. Like, if you're talking about island nations disappearing under the sea, there's going to be young people on those island nations who maybe all they've got left is wanting to get back at the people who they understand are the most responsible for that.
Maybe, yeah. That's a pretty deep way of looking at it, to be honest.
Well,
what happens when India becomes like, when India and Pakistan becomes too hot and too dry, and you've got like a billion people heading like north, and there'd probably be a heading into Afghanistan and that direction. Like,
I mean, the level
pretty
of
stable.
And what I think's really interesting, because we talk a lot about, you know, right-wing climate denial, but like I just heard earlier today when I was listening to something or reading something, Suella Braverman, when she was justifying the, you know, horrendous, you know, despicable, like, anti-refugee policies that she's pushing, she specifically referenced 100 million climate refugees being on the horizon. Like, these, like, proto-neo-fascist, you know... Is it alright to swear?
Yeah, fuck it.
Yeah, 'Cause, you know, these proto-neo-fascist fucks, 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 'Cause, you know, these proto-neo-fascist fucks they do understand what's coming down the road. Like they're not like, there is a lot of denial. There's a lot of the movies absolutely batshit insane. But like, I don't know if you saw what's he called? Aaron Bastani on Navarro Media did an interview with this really awful right wing like intellectual, like, which a lot of people think he shouldn't have done, and I don't think he should really have spoken to him. But like, this guy also referenced, you know, pushing this kind of like ethno-nationalist kind of bullshit. He referenced the millions and millions of climate refugees that are on the horizon, and like, these nationalist types who are wanting to like put machine guns on the beaches and on the, like, you know, walls up on all the borders, they do understand the chaos and the carnage that is coming. And they might pretend they don't when they're like, oh no, it's fine, more oil is fine, oh, it's just the loony left being all bleh. Like, but they're there putting the barbed wire on the border because they do actually know.
I think they're also building more prisons for people who decide to rebel.
100%. I mean, they're building mega prison. Have you seen the mega prison they're building up in Yorkshire? And they're saying it's going to be the first like eco prison because it's going to have like.
It's going to be an eco prison. It's going to be an eco prison.
Yeah, literally.
A fucking eco, literally.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I don't know if you can even call it irony. I don't even know what it is, but like, yeah, but that's exactly right. Like, that it's not a coincidence they're building these prisons. Like, they know that society is going to start getting a lot less stable and a lot less, like, people are already, like, how much people are struggling now? There's, like, we keep calling it like cost of living crisis as if it's just this like temporary thing. I don't think that's ever going away now. Like, the chaos is only going to get more and more intense.
Imagine, right, listen, the police were... Now, this, I could get fucked for this in the future. By the way, I need to make it clear to everybody that I'm not planning anything. I'm not involved in any planning or organisation to do with any organisations, period. I just run this podcast, and I like to run my mouth sometimes and think of ideas.
Good disclaimer.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking, like, the police were, like, yellow high-vis uniforms, so imagine if, like, the XR police wore orange. Like, pretty similar uniforms, but, like, bright orange. It's like... I don't know, like...
Yeah, I don't think we should model like some sort of militia on the police.
But we're in high vis makes perfect sense. It's why people wear it on the road, and it's why the police wear it in uniform. But it might as well be the opposite high vis. You know what I mean? The orange one.
Yeah, I think more maybe sort of less visible colours might be useful for some activities, but yeah.
Yeah, some activities.
I mean, yeah, you I saw you telling your story of like when you and some, you know, your mate were like on the run, like trying to get into an oil terminal. Like, honestly, I think it's so valuable that you're sharing these stories because, like, we need to inject this like more militancy and more like confrontational attitudes into, like, I think British politics, because like whether you like, you know, you don't have to think that like JSO have got the right approach, or like you don't have to like XR, but like what XR and JSO have you know, the like have done is just like, we can't, there's got to be confrontation. Like, and I think we're seeing that more now with this massive wave of like strikes and like industrial action, like ordinary working class people, you know, peasants, indigenous people. We're not gonna get to a sustainable world by asking the capitalist class, asking the ruling classes to give it to us. Like, it's going to be through struggle and confrontation and building power until we can, like you say, take power, not ask for it, like, and not even like demand it. Take the power from them, because like the Rishi Sunaks and Boris Johnsons and Keir Starmers of the world are not going to do, but they're not going to do anything. Like, they're not going to do, like maybe they'll be like, oh, we're doing some, like, whatever they do, it's going to be distraction bullshit. And I don't have any answers for like how we build that power other than collaborating more, working together more, and understanding that a lot of the quite different looking struggles are actually really connected. I think that's understanding that we actually need to fight together and back each other up more, maybe even when we're fighting on different fronts. Like, that's got to be the...
Do you know what you were saying about... Yes, I love that. I love that point. And I'm going to tell you about when I was in prison, I came up with an idea for a new organisation called One People, One Planet. And the idea would be that it would have the demands of every worthy cause that activists are fighting for. The Flat Earth Society are not really going to be invited. The COVID people, the vaccine people won't be invited. But like Animal Rebellion, Black Lives Matter, Extinction Rebellion, Just Stop Oil, whoever you are, you're fighting for a worthy cause, you're fighting for nature. The idea would be like, none of us go home until we've all had our demands met. Say like they meet like 90% of the demands, but there's like a 10%, like 2 organisations left that haven't had their demands met, then nobody is going home.
I mean, I think that is the kind of attitude we need, which is, that like, just understanding that, like, when you're fighting against this kind of planet strangling death machine, there's so many different ways it expresses that destructiveness, and there's lots of different ways that people are resisting it. And like, it might not look like it at a glance, but we really are fighting part of the same struggle. But that needs to be more than just words, because it's easy to say like, oh no, what, like, we've got to materially support each other and find ways of like linking up. And I think that's the main thing, because like currently we're all losing. Like, racism in this country is going to get worse. Like, poverty in this country is going to get worse. Like, homophobia and transphobia are going to get worse. Like, ecological destruction is going to get worse. All these things are going to get worse until we can start pushing back the other way. And yeah, I think that's a really... I mean, again, I do think, like, ultimately we've got to go past this idea of even having demands. Like, we've got to be thinking about, like, almost like your question, like, what would you do if you, like, but, like, what kind of society do we want to build? And then how do we actually get to the point where we have the power to build it? We're not asking, we're not demanding. The democratic participation of the mass of the population is actually getting involved with, like, what kind of society do we want to have and how do we build it together? Like, rather than, like...
What if a group of people came together, many thousands, maybe 100,000, in the name of a new declaration being signed? So, like, everyone if we get, like, all the groups together and you write a fucking declaration that's got all their demands in it. Like an actual declaration, like a country's declaration, like a government's declaration. It's a people's declaration, and that is law within this new, within its own realm, which is the people who are in it. And you just take, that's, it's quite a complex idea, but you're going to say something.
I mean, that's the kind of, like, I think, and that's the kind of visionary, like, the kind of thinking we need is, like, almost like, imagine if you were starting from scratch. I mean, I've still not actually read much of it myself, but like, what year was it? Was it Bolivia? What year was it? I can't remember what year it is. Was it called the Cochabamba People's Agreement? Was that kind of thing. It was a load of nations from almost entirely from the global south getting together. Kind of like a kind of counter to the sort of, the G7 and the G20 and all those kind of like COPs, like all the powerful nations getting together just to like talk and do nothing or do bad shit. And they've written a document that kind of lays out these kind of genuine universal human rights and like rights of the non-human living world. And like, it's a really good, like, this is kind of what they did. And like on an international level of like, what kind of world, what kind of, rights and like what kind of system do we want to actually have? And I think that kind of thing is what we need to be thinking about, because as long as we're kind of, our imaginations are kind of constrained by where we are right now, we're not gonna, it's not gonna work. Like what are the solutions to the climate crisis in the current thing, or under this current paradigm? It's biofuel. So like, destroying every last scrap of like ecology on the world to grow biofuels, and they do BECCS, carbon capture and storage. Like the solutions, the tech solutions that they've got are more like ecologically destructive than just carrying on with oil. Like this system cannot lead us out of this, and like we're gonna have to like somehow, and it's easy to say these things. Like it seems impossible. Like if I'm driving around Manchester, delivering a few bags of organic vegetables, looking at the dozens of tower blocks they're building, corporate offices and luxury flats, millions of tons of concrete and steel, all going up, and it's all utterly pointless. I'm looking at that and thinking, what can we do? How can we fight this? How can we fight this monster it's just so massive and so powerful? But at the end of the day, it's only powerful because we're all participating in it. And like all the construction workers who are getting paid shitty wages to build these shitty tower blocks, like
construction workers actually get paid pretty decently, actually.
No, and I know a lot of construction workers get paid pretty well, but like a lot of them also don't, and like it destroys their bodies for what they do get paid. But like,
yeah, that's true.
Do you know what I mean though? Like, imagine, and I have this thought, and it's what still gives me like a sort of shred of hope. Looking at all these tower blocks going up all over Salford, like gentrifying the whole of Salford, half of Manchester in one big push, building these pointless flat blocks that are just for like young yuppie corporate types who'll then move out to the countryside when they've made a bunch of money working for some shitty company. Imagine if all those resources, imagine if all that human labour and like ingenuity and like logistical organising, imagine if that was just going to transforming Manchester into a truly ecological, like socially like vibrant city, instead of if all that concrete and steel and human labour going into building these pointless corporate office complexes. Imagine instead it was just like, right, we are now going to we're going to have fully renewable energy in Manchester within 2 years, like, and we're going to throw, like, we could do it. But it's just because, but because it's got to be like, because there's money to be made in building these stupid blocks of flats. So that's what they're doing.
Because I want it to Manchester, right? So like there's a big main road, all the big main roads going down to Manchester. They're all at least two wide lanes, and some of them are even 4 lanes wide. Like I would literally like as wide as you can go, right up to the property line. Just take out all the concrete and all the steel and clear it all, take it all back, so you just got a big dirt black line, and then you'd create like probably maybe a single 1 lane of traffic, or maybe two lanes of traffic, just like enough to get like a truck down or something like that for delivery, and then it would be tons of greenery, so trees planted all the way down the outside to create like a green tunnel, and then trees planted down the middle as well to separate the cars from the cyclists and the pedestrians around on both sides. A bit like they do in Amsterdam or in not Amsterdam, sorry, in Madrid. No, Barcelona. I do a pretty good job at that.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
imagine if instead of driving to work in a traffic jam, you were cycling down a cycle safety route with greenery all around you and the sounds of the birds and much less air pollution. Think about the benefits it would have to the NHS, for 1, carbon emissions 2, and well, your wallet 3.
Yeah, no, completely. And this is the kind of thing. These are the kind of policies we can fight for now. Like, and this is why I think we need a completely I don't think it's possible to have an ecological society based around, private control of land, resources, and industry, and the use for them for private profits. But we can fight for things like that. Like, we can fight for a better transport system right now. And like you say, the cities around the world that have a much better system of public transport and active transport than we can even imagine. Like, 2% of commuters cycle in Manchester. 2%. And because we've got no cycle lanes, and it's a fucking death trap if you're on Great Ancoat Street or it's ridiculous. And it should be an international embarrassment to be seen as we're a global city, but try and cycle in it and you might die. We should be ashamed of that. It's pathetic. And the council are not interested in, because cycling, there's not a lot of money in cycling. There's a lot of money in buying, fueling, insuring, taxing, and fueling and replacing cars. There's so much money by Big Auto and Big Oil are making there. Whereas on your little bike, not a lot of money to be made there. Better in every way. Better for you, better for the city, better for the healthcare system, but not as much money to be made from it. So we get the big money but horrible outcomes option, and that's why we've got to fight to change that, the basis of our economy at the same time. But we should also be demanding cycle lanes right now, and trams. We've had trams for over 100 years. You can this annoys me now. I'm working as a delivery driver, so put the destruction of the climate system of the whole planet aside. All the people dying from air pollution, put that to one side. As a delivery driver, I'm getting annoyed because there's still every Tom, Dick, Ed and Harry is driving their personal, and there's so many of them SUVs, through the very centre of Manchester. You should not be driving a personal car through the absolute centre of Manchester. That is madness. What? Yeah, okay, maybe delivery vehicles we still need access to for now until we change that. But the fact that you can get in your Range Rover and drive to basically park up in Piccadilly Gardens, that is, we've not made.
Yeah, well, do you know what they do is they get a fine. They get a £30 fine or £50 fine. But some of these people are so rich, they're yeah, I'll just pay the £50 fine and park it right there.
The place where I drop off at, where the People's History Museum is, there's a bit there that's a loading bay. There's people in these fancy cars just clearly park in the loading bay, and they probably get a fine every day. But if you're rich enough, why would you care? You can park wherever you want with your ridiculous tank car, and it's just it's so unimaginative, and it's so I always think of you as someone who thinks a lot about things being kind of rational and make it logistically efficient. Everyone driving their own car is about as inefficient as anything you can imagine. Everyone's going home the same way. Why are they not on an electrified tram? Why is everyone sat in a little, a ton of steel on their own when they could be on one train altogether on a set of tracks? It's so inefficient. And this is why electric cars are the biggest con, I think, that's going. The idea that electrifying 1 billion cars is the solution to ecological destruction. It's just are you joking? We've got trains and buses. We've had them for centuries. Use them. It's not complicated, really.
Well, I think we need electric buses and electric. So I had an idea for a solution. Imagine if, let's say in the city of Manchester, they banned 99% of all single car use, and the only exception you could have to have a car was if you were literally disabled and you needed it to get to somewhere, and you can't ride a bike. And then everybody else, so you'd have imagine, so everybody gets free cycle lessons and discounted bikes, communal bikes that get given to them, and there's communal bikes locked up everywhere. They can just get them out and use them wherever you want, and abundant amount of bikes for the city. And then you do away from most of the cars, and then do what I told you about, said before about making big green tunnels out of trees all the way down every single major road and doing away with all the roads, because you can have like, I don't know, let's say you can have like one single lane of traffic on its own, isolated on what like, and then the rest of it's green, cycling and walking. You could even try and plan it out to get biodiversity like within the actual green belt. Like try and figure out how to get the most biodiversity in that space.
Yeah, I mean, like imagine if we actually had like people planning our cities who actually also had like the power to make stuff happen, like who had this really like radical. Like imagine what cities could be like if they weren't built around Primark and Starbucks making money. They were built around what do the people of Manchester, how do we make the lives of the people of Manchester as like amazing as possible and as ecologically efficient, and we're trying to reduce our ecological damage to the minimum level, and we're trying to make sure that living in this city is fantastic. Like, and
well, I'd also add one more thing to that what I was just saying. Imagine electric buses that are regular, free, and have spaces for bikes on them. So, like, you can take your bike on the bus, on the electric bus, up the hill for free, and then get off the top of the hill and then ride the rest of your journey.
Because that is annoying. You can't take your bike on the tram at the moment. And if you could, and that's something I think they need to experiment with, is like having like a happy bike hour when you can take your bike on the tram. Because then you could get all around Manchester. You could zip around. If you could combine bike travel and like light rail travel, you're zipping around. And like, yeah, like you say, it's way too expensive. It's like a £5 every time you get the tram. We need to be, and we like, it's cool that the buses are now £2 instead of like £6, but like, we need to be thinking about like, these are public services. They're essential public services. And like how we've thought about like the NHS, I think we've got to expand that thinking to be like, we need a national health service, national transport service. These are all things that like, they shouldn't be commodities. The profiteers need to be taken completely out of them, because these are things we need, and we need to provide them for everyone as efficiently as possible. There cannot be a middleman squeezing money out of them. They've got to be like, it's about the service and the users and the like people working, like the rail workers and the rail users. There's no sort of then like rail company going, could we sort of like just make loads of money out of this somehow? Like, no, fuck off. Like, there's the people like actually running the rail system, and there's people using the rail system, and that's it. And that's how you actually achieve like efficient results.
I think the problem with that is like, say if you create, would it be run by the government? Because like history has shown that sometimes governments run things way worse than corporations.
When has history shown that?
Well, look at just like road maintenance and works and things you have to get done. And well, you've put me on the spot now. There was actually I think it was the telegraph lines that were going up over America, and it was a government-led scheme, and the capitalist came along and basically applied to let him put up the lines instead. And I can't remember any names, so you have to I'm not going to be able to fact check this either. So, but basically, he just put the lines up a lot faster than the government were doing, because the government had to go through so much red tape and bureaucracy.
But I mean, the bureaucracy and red tape is stuff we create or don't create. Like, I think this idea that like, I mean, if you think about how many companies fail and go bankrupt versus how many governments collapse. But then I don't think that the current system of like states and governments is all about serving the interests of capitalists. Like our politicians are basically just like lapdogs of massive corporations. So like, if we imagine what if a state is ultimately just like trying to organize collective interests, if we had like real like democratic participation, real democratic like really democratized everything, like, and actually had people participating in that. And I think that's got to start at the local level, because like you say, like, yeah, having a big like state bureaucracy running something from far away, that's not going to be the most efficient way of doing that. Like, Manchester's tram system should be run by the people of Manchester for the people of Manchester, not having like a random French like state company holding a massive stake in it. Like Like, this is the thing, the current system means that there's people who can live on the other side of the planet who've never set foot in your city, can own... The guy who owns Man City, he owns half of Manchester now. Like, what? Like, why are you even allowed to own the city that we live in? Like, why is it not we owned by all of us collectively who live here? Like, because it's not a complicated idea. It's like the people who work in an industry should run the industry. The people who rely on an industry should have a say in how that industry is run. Like, if your only interest in the British rail system is sucking money out of it, then you've got no, you shouldn't be a million miles. And like, the rail system's a good example. Like, it's being run into the ground. The government are being forced to nationalise parts of it because the companies running it are just falling apart. And like, because there's some things that aren't good for making money out of. Like, and whereas, there's some things that are such a racket, like the water system. Like, the fact that the private, like, interest making money out of the fact that we need to drink water. Like,
yeah.
Especially when you live in Manchester and, it's not rained for a while, but, like, when it falls out of the sky quite as often and you're still having to pay hundreds of pounds to pad the pocket of some shareholders who live God knows where, like, so you can get water sent to you by people working in that system. Like, like, bless them, the people who do work round the clock to make sure that we've got clean drinking water and our shit gets washed away. Like, they are doing very important work. And, like, but then there's these people, like, sucking the, the wealth out of it. And, like, they shouldn't be involved. Like, we don't need them. We need the people. We need human labour and we need resources, and we've got them. We don't need these people sucking, like, just the vampires, like, sucking the wealth out of what we're creating.
Hey, Joel. I wanted to ask you a question about this, right? So, I've since I've been to prison and since I've been out, I've been doing some reading. I've been reading about the Russian Revolution. There's two of them, 1905 and 1917, and then the aftermath of 1917. I've been reading about that as well. And just to explain to anyone, because before I picked up this book, I thought of capitalism and communism. And when I thought of communism, I thought of the USSR and China. But what I learned from these books was the meaning of communism is not, those two countries do not represent communism in any way but name. Like, the meaning of communism is what we're talking about now. It's for the people, by the people, controlled by the people. And in the Western world, we've been driven to hate that word communism and think that the other, pick up by the capitalists, by the people who run everything. But, I think communism, the name communism, has lost its word, and socialism. I think we need a new name for it, if I'm being honest. But it's effectively the same thing. But the question ultimately is this, right? So after reading, I don't know how well read you are on the history of what happened in 1917
not
Russia.
Very
no?
At all. So, yeah.
All right, well, I'll give you the basic gist of it. Like, they had their revolution. The people had their revolution and threw the capitalists out of the country, took all the factories, took all the houses, took all the money, took all the land, took everything, and executed the royal family. Right? So, like, they'd done it. And the person who, like, a very influential person, like, who was Lenin in the movement, he started to get opposition in his own party against his position as a leader, and instead of, like, saying, okay, let's just keep running this as a democracy, he decided to build power and crush his enemies, and that continued until the point where he was mass murdering people and executing people in death camps. And one example I did read about this in this book, which was this is a real thing that happened in the Soviet Union, like between 1917 and 1925, there were thousands and like tens of thousands of women in a city that decided to go on strike together. They were going on a strike to demand that they get 1 day a week off work, and they wanted to have Sunday off work, every Sunday off work, and that was their demand. The state sent the Red Army in arrested about 10,000 of them, put 8,000 of them into gulags, forced labor camps, and executed 2,000 of them without trial. Like, the kind of things I read in this book were horrific, and it makes me scared because we talk about creating a revolution, but my question to you now is, how do we stop history from repeating itself by one or two madmen taking over and hijacking a revolution? I have been giving a lot of thought to this myself. I think whoever controls the army controls the country, so you need to think about the army and who runs it, your generals.
I mean, that's sort of like the biggest question. But and also, like, I feel like I need to learn so much more. Like, I've been learning more about the Chinese revolution and Mao, and like I've learned barely anything about the Russian Revolution, and like, but yeah, like that collapse into the brutality of Stalinism, and like the actual like crushing of actual socialists, like the people who are actually like still like fighting for real socialism were then like crushed. They
were murdered.
Yeah, and like the Soviet Union became kind of violently anti-socialist in within and without its borders a lot of the time. I still think it achieved a lot of good things, like most things in the world that have often been a mix of really bad and some good. But like, I think that is one thing I've thought a lot about when I've been thinking about this, and like I say, I am still very ignorant of history and political theory. I'm still trying to do my best to learn. I think we all need to be trying to learn as much as we can about the attempts to build a truly like democratic society, because that's all communism is. It's trying to actually make democracy mean something. It's just saying, like, until everything is democratic, until industry and land and production is democratic, democracy means nothing. One thing that I think gives me kind of hope for how we could try and do it better in the future, or in the present, is the technology we now have. Like, we have the like digital telecommunication technology where you can communicate with someone on every point of the earth in real time. Like, that would have been unimaginable in 1917. Like, Russia is a big ass country. Like, trying to actually like maintain like control of that, in you've got counter-revolutionary forces, and like you can see why even very principled people who had really idealistic and genuine like ideals and visions of building a truly communist a society like free of like exploitation, and how you could so quickly go like, no, but if we want to keep this revolution going, we've got to hold on to power, so we've got to crush out like anyone who opposes us. Like, you can see how that could happen to people who started off with genuine, and like I don't know a huge like, but I see Lenin as someone who was genuinely motivated by trying to make the world better.
But he started killing people though.
Well, lots of people have killed people. Like, I mean, I think if Lenin hadn't died, I think maybe, like he said, one of the things he said before he died was like, don't let Stalin take over because that guy's like a bastard. Like, but that's what happened, and then it got really nasty. And like, and I think we've got to try. I was reading some dark things about Lenin in that book. Well, I'm not gonna.
Yeah, like it was not like. Apparently he did some pretty bad shit. Like.
I'm sure he did. Like, but also you've got to think about what perspective the person writing history is coming from. But I think that question of how do we avoid that is and it's got to be. That's why it's got to be genuinely grassroots democratic participation. Like, I don't believe in this idea of like a small number of people seizing power, because it's just not, without that. And like, to be fair, in the Russian Revolution and the Chinese Revolution, there were millions of people involved, but like their power was then like squashed, and it ended up being like back to that system of a tiny number of like bureaucrats. Bureaucrats replaced capitalists and became the new ruling class. And like, I do think now that we've got this like amazing technology of the internet, like you could have a vote that like, this is why our systems of democracy and voting are so like insanely like archaic. But like, you could have a vote with like 60 million people like that. Like, you just all go on to like whatever the platform is, and you try to decide what to do about an issue in your territory, So you go, right, everyone go and like log on and let's have a let's decide this. And like that was
Yeah.
not that was not like even imaginable like 100 years ago, or even 50 years ago, or even 40 years ago. Like, whereas the ability we now have, and that's what's so tragic about the fact that the internet's actually creating so much misinformation. Like all this climate denial and like conspiracism, and like that's just helping ruling class interests. Like the internet should be the most amazing like tool of like liberation and progress, but instead it's like, well, it can be that, it still can be that, but like it's also being used to just like spread misinformation in a more, even more toxic way than like the newspapers and the TV stations manage. Because it used to be the case that if they were trying to propagandize you, it would only work when you were reading the paper or watching the TV. Now you've got your phone with Facebook on every minute of every day, and you've got these, particularly older people, looking at all this shit and just rotting their brain. And like this is why like
it really does, doesn't it?
Critical thinking, like being able to like, and you I really respect this about you, because you are genuinely interested in the world, you're fascinated by it, and you want to learn about it, and you're willing to like look at stuff and think about it and read about it, and like that is it's that openness and that urge to learn and develop that's the number one thing. If people have that, you don't really need to. That's all they need. Like all the information is out there. If if you're curious and you're interested, and you're like not a psychopath, like you'll work a lot of this stuff out for yourself. Like I think we've both done it. Like I didn't have any political upbringing at all. Like I have, my parents didn't vote until they were like in their 50s, till like the first year I voted. Like I had no political background whatsoever, but I was brought up to believe you have to care about people and you can't be selfish. And then I had to figure politics out for myself.
Can I just stop you there for 1 second and just check that your recording's still going?
Was in my audio recording?
On your phone. Yeah, your audio recording, yeah. Just check it's still going, yeah?
It is, yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, mine's too, so we'll continue again. One second, what was I going to say now? Shit, what was the last thing you just said then?
Political, like the internet as this tool for like learning and communicating, and how like you need to have that urge to, you need to have a little bit of critical thinking capacity, and that's all you really need.
Oh yeah, and I can remember I was going to tell you. Now I remember I was going to tell you. So basically, before I became aware of the climate crisis, I was still very interested in learning those kinds of things. And one of the things that I did learn was that a very small percentage of people on this planet control everything. They control all the central banks, all the media, all the corporations and all the money, and our democracies as well. I became aware of this like probably 2012, 2013. And I knew that climate change was a problem, but I didn't really understood it properly. But I was watching the price of solar power fall on a graph versus like the price of fossil fuels, and I thought, oh well, no problem. The problem's going to sort itself out. I don't have to worry about this. Eventually, the price of solar power will drop so cheap that the capitalists will have to change to fossil fuel, change to thingy. But no, it turns out. The capitalists are in bed with your government, and the government pay the fossil fuel industry, what is it, like 20-odd million pounds per day? Just like subsidising that form of producing energy to make it compete. They basically artificially changing the energy market and putting clean energy electric production at a disadvantage. Like imagine if they put all those profits into green energy and they made it so energy companies could make a killing making genuine green energy. They could make more money on than they could make than oil. Then I think the system could just switch, to, I don't know. Like it'd have to be like a modified version of capitalism where there's no greed, but
that's not possible. There has to be. Like, You can't have steady state, and this is the issue. When you say genuinely green energy, solar panels aren't made from like sunlight. They're made from like a load of mined materials that like, and
Yeah,
none of those mines are in Britain. Those mines are in other parts of the world, and those mines are devastating for the local ecologies. Like,
and I know that is.
you can't
Can I just
replace
say?
oil power with solar power, and it'll just be the same.
No, no, no. I can tell you what I want to replace oil and gas power with. Tidal hydropower. I want us to build out like massive, massive like it's for one. There's a type of concrete that's been created that uses carbon dioxide as an ingredient, so therefore it's carbon negative to produce. So for one, mass produce a shit ton of that, and then build out these dams going out to sea that could that like trap like huge amounts of water in them, but like the height of them stops below like with the tides all the way in, the top of the dams is like below it, so fish can. So on a high tide, all the fish and wildlife can swim over the dam and get out into another area. But when the tide goes out and the water level comes down past the dam, the tide goes out, and you've got miles of cubic meters of water with a difference at height, which then would power turbines. And you can make it when the tide comes back in and the water level's down, then you've got a difference in height, and the water changes direction and turns the turbines the opposite direction and produces power. So it would be continuous, all 24/7 hour, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Power.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the prospect of tidal power seems like really exciting as a reliable, because you know the whole thing about, oh, it's not always sunny, it's not always windy. The tide goes in and out every day until the moon falls out of the sky. The tides are very reliable, so I think that's really like, yeah, really exciting. But again, like I think we've got to talk about, and this is the same conversation, it's just in different words about when we talk about capitalism, like degrowth, like the energy used in like places like the USA, Canada, Australia, and obviously Britain, but the US, Canada, Australia being like off the charts. Like the energy they use, the materials they use is just insane. And like that has to, like one way or another, that's got to be reduced. Like, but at the same time, everyone's lives can get better. Because like you say, if you're not stuck in traffic every day after work, instead you just whiz home on a super fast train, that's better. Your life is better. You're not using as much energy because you're not driving a massive car with just one person in. But like your life is better. The quality of your life improves. And this is why I think ultimately got to try and break with capitalism, because like we can improve people's lives, but in ways that make less profit. And as long as we're like shackled and constrained by that need to grow profits, we can't actually focus on making people's lives better in the most efficient ways. And like, because like that tidal, like, but once like tidal power, say you build that tidal barrage, you've built it. Who's then who owns it then? Because like oil companies, what's that the famous quote from the big guy from BP saying like, being in oil is like just having like a money printing machine. Like you've constantly got to extract it, you've constantly got to refine it, you've constantly got to transport it. Like there's always more money to be made with oil. Like if you've built a tidal barrage and then it's just sat there, like you don't have that constant need
producing
to like
power.
Yeah, constantly producing power. But like that could so much more easily be owned by like the city that's like just inshore from it. Like there's not that opportunity for constantly making more money, constantly like opening new extraction, because you've built it and then it just produces power for years and you don't have to do like, do you know what I mean? Like with oil, because it's always running out, you always need more, you always need new wells. Like there's always that opportunity for more extraction, more expansion, more profit. Like for like some of these really efficient like wind and wave power, you build it, and it's just going to produce power for years. And like there's no like room for like constantly.
There's a step up from that, by the way. So most of the biodiversity of life in the ocean is by the coast. So actually, it'd be better to go out to where the wind turbines are, where there's less fish and less animals living near the coast, and build in a big massive dam around all the windmills. and then have the same effect happen but out at sea, and then add that energy into the power the windmills are producing as well.
See, there's such like exciting like ideas for like what we can do, but I think we've got to, like you say, like all of these things do have an ecological cost, and like again, that's why like we've got to be thinking about how to be more efficient, so use less energy but with better results. Like, and I think a lot of these, like, if you make these combinations of wind and solar and tidal, and also just more efficient, like if you like imagine like you replace like 1,000 cars with one train, like how much you've reduced the overall energy you're using there is massive. Like, and that's not anyone like like this they try and like there's so much propaganda around the idea of degrowth, like, oh, it's making everyone poor, it's making everyone go back and live in caves. It's like no, it's saying like let's do things efficiently, like let's actually be like, what do people need and how do we get that to them? Like that's what it's about. It's about saying like, right, people need healthcare, let's like organize healthcare. People need transport, let's organize transport, rather than being like, let's let a load of companies who ultimately just exist to make money.
What if, right, you take a coastal city like Brighton, and you start a community pot where you gather up a lot of money from people, and so we're going to build a tidal barrage, and then we're going to build it out at sea as well, and that's going to produce so many mega kilowatts, so like millions of kilowatts, and that will be enough to power, let's say the schools and the hospital, and the new tram line that we're going to build that goes all throughout the city, like, and then the excess power will just make everybody's bills cheaper.
I mean, that's exact. I mean, to be fair, there's something not quite as ambitious as that. But in Manchester at the moment, they're running a community shares campaign. I saw someone from Friends of the Earth share it, I think, to build a solar array on a school, and I can't remember where it is. That'll be like community owned, and like I think these are really important things, because this is how we take back. This is how we start to build our power, democratic power. Like in contrast to capitalist power, real democratic power. We pool our resources and we build some infrastructure that we all need, and it's community owned. And like we can do that now. Like, and I think we need more and more of that.
What if, right? Hear me out. We get a community. We get a community warehouse together, right? Where we're growing indoor vertical farming, and like on a bigger scale, we can maybe outside, but no, indoor vertical hydroponics, like but managed by people, not by robots. It's like not super complicated, and there's machines that you're going to need. There's basically a machine that's been invented. It's basically a glorified dehumidifier, and it can pull about 8 litres of water out of desert air when it's turned on. It's about the size of a little coffee table. It's got a solar panel built into it. So imagine if you had a couple of those as well on your warehouse, producing the power for your hydroponics. And you could build a centre that provided free food and drinking water to the local community in the area, that to help feed everybody and give everyone water. And then that would be kind of, once people don't have to, they're not. Thing is, you have to replace every service that the government provides to the people to make the government not matter anymore.
I think that is, but I don't know exactly what I think about like the role of the state going, like if you can truly democratize it, if it's always going to be exploitative and oppressive, like something like the NHS, something like healthcare. I think it makes sense to organize a healthcare system partly at a kind of wide, well, maybe national, like what is a fucking nation state, but then it also makes sense to make it really local as well, because then it's focused on the local people's, like you're always going to have specific health issues and things like that, and social issues that are like specific to your local area. So it makes sense to have as much of that local like knowledge and expertise as possible running shit. So like, yeah, I think these ideas of like community energy, community food production, these are like, this is something that I think there's so much value in people putting energy and resources into this. I really like. I think that and not just because of like the immediate benefits, but because I think this is how we collectively build our social power to take more power to do the big stuff.
I want to say something about this. I'm reading about this Russian Revolution. That what you just explained then is how it started. Every town had a Soviet, and that Soviet was a people's council to decide how things are run in that town. And the people who ran in the Soviet and had power, temporary power, got no special treatment and no extra money. They were paid the same wage as a working man, and they changed them every so often, and they had Soviets, and different regions had different Soviets, and they're all centralized power. That's how it started. So, like,
I mean,
but what happened was,
one
of the things that happened is, can you imagine being like the ruling elite in like Germany and the UK and France, and you look over to the east and you see the ruling elite in Russia get murdered, and all the land's taken, and a full-blown people's revolution that just takes over like your cousin's land. You know what I mean? They're all dead, and now they've the people have got control of the country. They literally put a blockade. They put a trade embargo on and this is in the middle of World War One as well as Russia. Like they're currently at war with Russia anyway. So that all the world's governments like stopped like trading with Russia to let the people like starve out the revolution. Do you know what I mean? Because they wanted it to fail, and they did have a major effect. Like people were struggling and starving, and then they meddled in the the outside powers were meddling within the support, and the whole thing got lost basically because it got corrupted, and the original revolution was gone, and all the people who tried to create a new revolution afterwards, like they got murdered as like counter-revolutionaries, like because they believed that the leaders had betrayed the original morals of the revolution. Those people got murdered who said that. A lot of them got murdered. Anyway, you were saying...
No, and I think that's really... And I think that, they had the saying, all power to the Soviets, which was then immediately, pretty immediately, completely gone back on. But that is the solution. It's like those... And I think XR has focused on that. Like that was a really positive thing from the start. Like focused on the idea of citizens' assemblies, people's assemblies, people working on trying to learn lessons from the Kurdistan freedom movement, and in northern Syria, like Rojava, their kind of multi-level council model, really local grassroots democratic involvement, the people trying to implement the lessons from Corporation Jackson in Jackson, Mississippi. That's so much around this, these local people's councils. The only way you're gonna get people to get involved and make put their time and effort and energy into something is if they're involved in it and they have a say in it and they can participate in it. And if people we're so disempowered, people that's why I think you're such an fascinating person, because you've kind of really grasped your own power as an individual to do stuff. And as a society generally, we are so completely disempowered. People don't believe they can control anything, even their own life. People just feel like they're completely powerless, because they are a lot of the time. And you're meant to be. Thatcher broke the trade unions. That was working class organized power kind of destroyed in this country for generations. And if people can believe that they can actually take their own destiny into their hands, their hands of them and their family and their community, if they can start believing that, then they can really start to change stuff. And it's just it's helping people discover that is true, that we actually do have power to do stuff. And that's why I think a lot of the stuff that, JSO and XR have done, that to me is a large part of the value of it. It's showing that you can defy very powerful people if you're just willing to do it. And you can send out ripples and waves, just by being willing to stick your neck out. And I think that is a very powerful message, and that's why they're so keen to twist the message and warp it and suppress it and demonize people in every way possible. Because the last thing the powerful,
can I say,
people
one thing you just said about, you said about ripples. You don't know how far your ripples can go. Like this is something really deep that I realized. Um, like when you do an action, for example, and you do an arrestable action, or you sit in the road, or you see smash Barclays windows, or do something like that, you get in the news. Maybe a few million people see it, and then it's like a big wave like of people that have been influenced by your decision to do something, and then if that makes the slightest change in any of their decision making or what they think about in that day, that wave continues on through them and everybody they come into contact with, and really we don't know how far the ripples of our actions will go. I'm sure that's been said in a film somewhere, but it's the truth. You know, like
Absolutely.
Interlake Britain, for example, right? 140 people repeatedly sat in the road and blocked the M25 motorway, willing to go to prison, and we persistently went back. From that, movements all over the world have stepped up out of Extinction Rebellion and their local groups, and they created several different groups all around the world for each countries, blocking motorways and copying the same tactics. So we don't know, and then everyone who they are going to influence as well. So really, an individual can have a lot of power. Like, even if you can't be arrested, like I know people who just support people who are in action. For example, like if I don't know, let's say you're retired with a big house, but you can't really take action because of whatever reason, and there's actions happening in your city, you could host a couple of climate activists and let them stay in your house because they're probably broke and they've got nothing at the minute, and it'd really help them out. Lots of things you know. But cool. About ripples, you don't know how far your ripples can go.
No, totally. And I mean, I'm not super keen on the sort of A22 Halamist network of organisations and those particular ripples, but like I do, like we live in such uncertain and like fluid, like the world's so complicated. Like we can never really know what the impact's going to be of what we do, and like I do think you're right that like I think a small number of people can, you know, have some influence, but like ultimately we do need huge numbers of people getting much more involved, much more organized. If we're taking on such massive vested power, the only thing we've really got is mass people power, and that's what we've got to tap into. And I do think that's why I think, like, you know, JSO actions where people have gone and like attacked the front of like Tufton Street and like News Corp. That's what I want to see. Like, if you're willing to be, you know, if you're willing to do something really courageous, like go and stick it to the people who, you know, who deserve it. Like, because that I think that speaks to people on a really powerful level, and like it does inspire people. You see people doing stuff that you've never thought about doing, and you suddenly think it does. Like you say, maybe it just changes your mindset a little bit. And then you see something else, it changes it a little bit, and then it all adds up, and who knows where it ends. And like we've just all got to keep pushing.
Can I tell you what I want to do in the future now? I'll come up with an idea.
Go on.
So, in Scotland currently, they have different laws to the UK, different legal system. All these nasty laws they're bringing in now mainly just take effect in England. I'd like to, if Just Stop Oil start doing like oil silo occupations again in Scotland, like I'd like to join them and take all my recording stuff with me and just do record like record like several hours of podcasts like on the pipework over there inside the oil terminal, like, and then get arrested afterwards.
I mean that is what I think that would be true frontline journalism. I think that is the kind of thing we need to see more of, is blurring this line between people doing media and people doing you know, protest and other forms of action. Like I think the more those things are brought together and those lines are blurred, I think that's I want to see that.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Shall we is this a good place to to wrap things up?
Yeah, if it's convenient for you, yeah. We've been going for quite a while actually.
I'm just conscious that I'm like, who on earth? What would have to be wrong with someone to listen to us to talk for this long?
if you're available to keep going, I would like to keep going. Because people listen to podcasts in the background. They don't sit and watch the video. They just put it on whilst they're driving or whilst they're
that is true.
working.
That is what I do when I'm listening to them. Well, I'm conscious that I need to wash myself and eat a bit before tomorrow.
That's fine.
But I'm happy. But like, yeah, no. If you want to ask, if there's like, yeah, you know.
All right. Well, how about just tell me what would be your final words then for the podcast? Your advice to everyone, all 65 of my subscribers and all future people.
I don't know. What do you have any final like? I guess.
Well, go on.
I think if I had to try and think about what like single, you know, and it's ridiculous trying to melt it down, but what I think we just need to see more and more of is this fusion of red and green, to put it like that way. Like class struggle and climate struggle need to be exactly the same thing, and we need to have more and more people understanding that if you have any interest in advocating for like working class people, you need to be like very climate conscious, like really climate conscious. And if you have an interest in trying to fight for climate action and climate justice, you need to understand that that is a class war. Because there's a class of people who are benefiting from climate destruction, and then there's the majority of the world who are going to pay for it. And like, we need to understand where these battle lines are. And we've got a terrible situation currently in this country where we've got unions like GMB who are still pushing for like fracking, and like Unite pushing for like Heathrow expansion. And we can't have that. We need radical climate conscious, you know, activists to take over these unions, because we need trade unions to be like fighting and radical, but we need them to be leading the way on climate, like, and ecological stuff, not pushing in the wrong direction. Like that is disastrous. And we also need climate activists to realise that this is about class war, this is about class struggle, and understand what that means, and we all need to be working together to work out how the hell we do this, because like, no one's got the answers, and I think anyone who says they have got the answers is pulling, you know, is you know, taking the piss a bit, because we're trying to work this out together, because it is totally unknown how we try and get to the world we need to get to, but we're only going to do it by, and this is why I appreciate you so much, constantly learning and communicating with each other and cross-pollinating those ideas and fighting together. Like, that is the only way. And it's very easy to say, it's incredibly difficult to do in reality. Like, we put three of us in a room and we can't agree for more than about 2 minutes. So like, it's the hardest thing in the world, but we've got to try and do it.
What do you think about podcasting for a medium for activism then?
I think it's really, really important. I think what you're doing here is brilliant, and like, it's what, you know, I've been trying to do. I just can never stick with anything or consistently do anything ever. I think we need more, like, you know, the media is the biggest. They control what people think. It's the biggest barrier to the radical consciousness, class consciousness, and climate consciousness that we need. Like, so the more like independent, small, like truly independent, and like people who've got experience of doing so few people have done the kind of things you've done, like in the past couple of years, and like having those conversations and talking to people who maybe don't agree, you know, who do believe in trying to transform the world and like address climate breakdown, but maybe they've got a very different perspective on what you've been doing. You having a conversation with them and them talking, you know, and then understanding where you're coming from. That's what we need to have, and this is really important. I think it's incredibly valuable what you're doing, and I hope. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I hope you keep doing this. And I hope there's lots more of these episodes.
Well, I'm gonna if I get sent to prison tomorrow, I'm gonna keep interviewing people. So I'm gonna be ringing people from prison. I'm sorry to all the listeners. If the audio quality suddenly drops, like for the next episode, you know why. Anyway, I think we'll leave it at that.
Well, I also just want to say, like, I have such a massive respect for your integrity and your just not your unwillingness to bow the knee to the legal system of the capitalist state, because yeah, I really respect that. I think that is really impressive to just be like, nah, fuck you. like that's it's a bit crazy, but I respect it.
Thing is, it doesn't come from like a tactical, logical, thought out plan. It comes as like a more of an emotional response.
I know,
like,
that's what I respect. Like,
I feel so betrayed by our government. Like, there's children in this world, not my children, but there are children in this world that I absolutely love and adore, and I know that their future is being sold out by the very minute. And it cuts particularly deep, because when I realise, like, I'm actually one of the people fighting for it, and I'm surrounded by people who don't have a clue. And it's kind of like the feeling I explain, like taking this action. It kind of like feels like you're standing in a house upstairs with all your friends and family and everyone you love and everyone you know and everyone you've never heard of, like, and you go downstairs to the kitchen and there's a massive raging fire, and it's licking up the side of the stairs, and it's going to be coming up the stairs pretty soon. So you run upstairs and you've got pictures of the fire, you're running screaming about the fire, and everyone just says, be quiet and what carries on, or I'm not, no, we for whatever reason they just don't want to listen to you. And that's it. If you're listening now and you put yourself in a situation, there's a fire downstairs, you're trying to get your family out and they won't listen to you, you would be on your knees crying to them, trying to drag them out through the front door. Like you would, and if they refuse, if you couldn't move them, you'd break you. Like, it'd break you massively, and you'd know that everyone in that room is about to die, and they haven't even realised it yet. And yeah, so that's a way that I feel about it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, well, and I just think a lot of people kind of have that understanding on some level, but so few people still put it into genuinely are willing to sacrifice their own well-being, and that's the thing that makes, and I think that there's, like you with that, we were saying about ripples, I think you are sending out very, even if I don't agree with all the tactics and a lot of the thinking and like whatever, like just the fact that people are willing to confront this reality and act courageously and self-sacrificingly in the face of it, that has so much power, and that communicates something to people. Even if it's not, if it's only a small subset of people who are seeing that and understanding it, that is communicating something more powerfully than anything else can. And I think that's really important that, we're all trying to do.
I think the people it affects the most is when you've got someone who's not arrestable, who's supporting arrestables, and they're doing things like driving them to drop them off at oil silos and hosting them in their homes, and really getting to know these people who are doing this, and really being to respect and love these people. And then when one of those people goes to prison, it leaves a hole, and the actions aren't happening, and all these non-arrestables are stood around looking at the hole, and one of them goes, fuck it, and jumps in it and does the first arrestable action. So I think it has that kind of effect on people.
Yeah, no, it is the propaganda of the deed is very powerful, and I think especially in Britain, where we're so depoliticized and de-radicalized and consciousness is so low, I think injecting a bit of that confrontational action is so important, and it does, people are inspired by it, and who knows where it'll end.
Okay, well, thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, by the way, you're welcome to come on again anytime. You don't just have to do one episode.
Nice.
And we're going to sign off right there. See you later. Bye.